Hi folks, and welcome to my video on how to refit pedals on exercise bikes. Now, one of the most important things to figure out in fitting pedals is which pedal is going to go on which side. And conveniently, the pedals are normally marked. So if you turn the pedals over, there's a good chance you'll see somewhere stamped inside the casing an R for right and an L for left, which is a bit of a clue. It's a bit of a giveaway, really, that. So R goes on the right, L goes on the left. And that's important because the threads match. You can't put the right hand pedal on the left hand side. If you try to do that, there's a good chance, well, more than a good chance, you'll end up damaging the thread of the pedal and of the pedal arm, which is this silver part here. So you really don't want to do that, and it makes life very difficult. So first of all, figure out which goes which. And we're always talking about from the perspective of the person who's using the machine. So it's the right hand side if you imagine you're actually sat on the bike using it, clearly. So let's put the right hand pedal on first. We'll just pull the bike around so you've got a better view of it. And let's bring that up to the top. And first of all, we need to figure out, well, which way is this thread going to go? If you're an engineer, you'll be familiar with threads and which way to screw them. But if you're not an engineer, then it can be quite difficult. And this exercise bikes are especially difficult with pedals, and you'll see why in a moment. Now, start with the right-hand side, because the right-hand side's nice and easy to work out. In other words, the direction of the thread follows the convention of righty-tighty and lefty-loosey. In other words, go to the right or clockwise to tighten, left to loosen. And that's a standard engineering convention that you'll find on 99% of anything that you do, any screws and threads you deal with. So start on the right, because that's always going to be the easiest, because it's going to feel the most natural. Check that the threads are clean. If necessary, just put a little bit of lube in there, you know, like a 3-in-1 oil or a light oil of some kind of machine oil. And just start the thread by hand. It's always important to start the thread by hand, because you can feel if it's going cross-threaded. And by that, I mean that if you don't get the thread meshed quite right, you can see the threads there. If they don't mesh quite right with the thread in the crank arm in the silver part, then you can cross-thread it. And the problem is, of course, if you go straight away and use a tool and you've got it cross-threaded, you won't get that sort of feedback. You'll have damaged the thread, and it'll be too late before you realise there's a problem. So my suggestion would be always do it by hand to start with, because if there is a problem, straight away you feel it. And of course you can't damage the thread just if you're using your fingers. You haven't got that sort of strength to do that kind of damage. And make sure the thread starts cleanly, and you'll be able to tell if it does, because it will be screwing on well. That feels just fine. And then you reach a point you can't do it anymore with your fingers, so get your tool and tighten it up. And that's pretty straightforward, and you go until it stops. Now, if you're going to get technical about this, you'll be wanting to know, well, how much do I tighten it up? How do I know whether enough is enough? And the answer is, well, it needs to go to between 55 and 60 Newton meters. And to do that, you really need a big spanner. You probably won't get that sort of leverage with this kind of tool. But with this kind of tool, there's a good chance you will. And of course, you can just tighten it up by giving it a few sharp taps just on the end of the tool until you're happy that it's nice and tight. Now, the proper way to do it, of course, would be to use a torque wrench. And if you're interested in torque wrenches, then there's a separate video on torque wrenches that you can access via our training portal. But otherwise, if you don't have a torque wrench, then just do them up as tight as you can without causing yourself an injury. Obviously, you've got the risk of the tool slipping and coming out of the flats here, and it can slip and you can damage your knuckles and scrape your arm and all sorts. So take care with that. But do it as tight as you can. Then let's go around to the left-hand side. Let's flip the bike around here so you can see this. And we're going to do the same here. Now, because we're on the left-hand side always has a left-hand thread. So that means that the conventional rules that you'll be familiar with, in other words, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, are reversed. So we would normally go righty-tighty, in other words, this way to tighten, but we can't. It's a left-hand pedal and a left-hand thread. So in this case, we're going to go lefty-tighty. In other words, the opposite to what would probably feel natural. And again, do it finger tight. Just make sure that the thread's engaged properly. Just remind you, if you use your tool too early, you can damage the thread and you just won't feed it. You won't get the feedback and the feel through the tool. So just start it with your fingers, and then when you reach a point you can't do it anymore, get your spanner and again just tighten it up till you reach the shoulder and it stops, just like that. And then if you've got a bigger tool, pop that on there and just finish the job off. Sharp tap just on the top like that, and that should be plenty. And again, 55 to 60 Newton meters with a torque wrench if you want to get technical about it. If you're doing this commercially and professionally, then it's always best to check the manufacturer's specifications for the torque, because they are load-bearing parts, and if you're in a commercial environment and doing this as a profession, you don't want to randomly tighten it up and think, oh yeah, that's about enough. You really want to be hitting that 55 to 60 Newton meters according to whatever the specification is for the product you're working on. So I hope that's been of use. I'll see you on the next video.